Marlon Humphrey did not hold back on the Baltimore Ravens defense with comments that were very refreshing after the team's epic Week 1 collapse. We talk about what he had to say and a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, if we're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage for you here on Locked On Ravens. Jam-packed episode today. The Spencer German of Locked On Browns will join us for Crossover Thursdays. We do each and every Thursday during this season on the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll talk about the biggest storylines, the matchups to watch, as well as how each team can win this game. But I also want to dive into a little bit in the opening intro part here about Marlon Humphrey's comments about the Ravens defense, as well as Jerry Jeudy calling out the Ravens secondary. So a lot to dive into. Want to remind everybody today's episode, Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens, is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now, Marlon Humphrey spoke to the media on Wednesday, and he got very honest. He called out the Ravens defense, didn't hold back on them as well. And again, I thought the comments were very refreshing personally. And he said he got a flush last week, obviously, but then kind of dove into a little bit about the maturity of the defense and the team. He said, quote, we're just not mature enough as a team yet. It's very clear we've got great players on both sides of the ball, but defensively we have to work on our maturity too. It doesn't matter what our offense is doing. We have to go up there and win the game. And right now, our maturity level, sadly, when we get in those situations, is just not enough. Then a reporter followed up on how to address that maturity level on the defense. And he said, quote, that's definitely something we're still working on. When you're going through it, you really have to think. Everyone wants to make a play. That's the biggest thing. And talk a lot about the fact that you got to do your job. And if a play comes to you, it comes to you. You don't go out there and try to make a play and then do your job, right? And then he said that it was really crazy how they were getting beat and the situations they've gone over. And he said, quote, working on maturity comes in practice. We do a lot of scenarios. It's crazy how we did the exact scenarios that we lost on multiple times all throughout camp. Said that they were perfect in calls for a lot of the things that happened, but they didn't execute those calls properly. And he said that's why the loss hurt so bad. And he said, quote, so that maturity, we're still working on it, and we're looking to build on that maturity on Sunday. And talked about the more true group defensive effort and said that they really didn't, he doesn't want to have it be like last year. He said, quote, we're not going to get into a situation similar to last year where we kind of mask over this and try to do this and protect this guy, protect that guy. The guys that do it right are going to play. It's really just that simple. I think we're just too talented of a team to continue to have those collapses, the kind that we've had. He said that was kind of the message, and I think everybody can respect that going forward. So, really refreshing again from Marlon. And this is something where, Marlon is kind of regarded as like, I guess, one of the silly guys on the roster, the funny guy, but I give Marlon credit. He takes accountability in a lot of these situations and a lot of these moments, and he gets very real on a lot of these topics when it comes to just what this team needs to do to win and what it has been like for them. So I was really happy that Marlon kind of stepped up to the plate here and, was kind of just like, this isn't acceptable, is essentially what his comments were. So hopefully they can take that message to heart from Marlon, and that's what they're talking about in the meeting rooms for Baltimore, which it seems like, according to Marlon, that is what is going on. Jerry Jeudy also had a message. He ended up calling out the Baltimore Ravens secondary. He was asked about the Ravens secondary, the playmakers and challenges that the Ravens secondary presents, and he just straight up said, no challenges. No challenges. And I'm just like, okay, Mr. Jerry Jeudy, I get the Ravens. Their pass defense was not good in week 1. They're the 32nd ranked pass defense in terms of total yards, 27th in terms of yards per attempt. But this is still a secondary that has 5 former first rounders on it. You got all pros, you got pedigree. I think that defense does present some challenges, particularly obviously the secondary that she was talking about. It does present challenges. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into our crossover Thursday with Spencer German of Locked On Browns. Spencer, the Ravens and the Browns, they are at the bottom right now of the AFC North, both coming off of losses. I still say the Ravens didn't play a game in week 1. I don't know what happened. There was nothing. The Ravens had
out, huh?
Yeah, week 1 bye week. You know how it goes. So fresh slate for the Ravens this season, which is nice. No, of course, the Ravens had a devastating historic collapse against the Buffalo Bills. The Browns almost pull out a win against the Bengals. They just cannot execute late. These AFC North games, Spencer, they're always really weird. We saw the Browns beat the Ravens with Jameis Winston last season in a game that the Browns went out there and took. Right now in Cleveland, after 1 week, what's the biggest storyline right now?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a number of different angles to kind of attack this. I think from a matchup standpoint, there's a lot of stuff that we can get into. I think for the Browns specifically, the big storyline this week is either that Joe Flacco is making his first trip back to M&T Bank Stadium to Baltimore to play his former team of his career. But I also think internally there's a lot of talk right now about Quinshon Judkins, whether or not he's going to be able to play on Sunday. He signed his contract last weekend. He did not practice on Wednesday because all indications are from reporting that he was meeting with league officials given his off the field situation. Don't know if there's going to be discipline coming on the pike here for him. My guess right now is that that's probably a little too optimistic to see him play as soon as Sunday. But obviously that's something to keep an eye on because if he's out there, I do think that changes things a little bit for this Browns offense and it adds a weapon for them to obviously take advantage of against this Ravens defense.
Yeah, certainly. I think for the Ravens, Joe Flacco coming back to Baltimore is a massive storyline. First time, yes, since he got traded to Denver back in that end of 2018 into the 2019 season when Lamar Jackson took over. But obviously for the Ravens, just from a not even week 2 matchup perspective, which we'll get to, it's just moving on from what happened in week number 1. And I think one of the big things that a lot of people have kind of latched onto from Wednesday's media availability with the Ravens, Marlon Humphrey, who has been very outspoken about a lot of different things and has certainly taken accountability when it has been needed. He had a couple of really pointed comments at the team's defense and honestly called them out in a way, talked about how they essentially are lacking maturity. He said that it's crazy how the exact scenarios, they worked on these all throughout camp and they lost multiple times all throughout camp. He said that they were in a lot of perfect calls for everything that happened, but they didn't execute the calls properly. And, he said that they're still working on the maturity as well as the fact that they don't want to have what happened last year happen this year. They don't want to protect anybody. He said the guys that do it right are going to play, and it's really just that simple. So clearly they're frustrated by the loss in week 1. I would assume they come out with a vengeance here against Cleveland in week 2. But we saw this situation unfold last year, Spencer, where the Ravens lost to Kansas City by a toe in week 1, going back, or I guess playing the team that they lost to in the playoffs. And then they returned to face a Las Vegas Raiders team, which on paper they should have probably beaten. And they ended up dropping that game and falling to 0-2. So on paper, the Ravens better than the Browns right now. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can't just show up and expect to win the game. You got to go out there and perform.
Yeah. And I do think that there's always this weird aura that clouds these AFC North games just in general. Especially this time of year, right? Because early in the season, I mean, the Bengals are notorious for starting off 0-3, 1-3, whatever it is, and getting off to these slow starts because they're always kind of trying to figure out their identity. But then you throw in the mix, like, they're playing a division opponent, or you're playing a division opponent who knows you well, knows your tendencies, studies you more than any other team. And I think that played itself out last week a little bit. I mean, if you go back and watch that game, if you go even just check the box score, the Browns outplayed the Bengals in pretty much every phase of that game. And it came down to the fact that they had a kicker that they might not be able to count on moving forward, who missed 2 key kicks for them, and you leave 4 points off the board. There was a couple drops that if they go different, if they go in the favor of Cleveland and they don't drop those passes, maybe they are set up for another field goal attempt or they score another touchdown or whatever it is, and they're walking out there with a win. And so, Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how the Browns kind of bounce back from what was a gut-wrenching loss, but felt like they played well enough to win. And conversely, on your side of things, like I'm curious to see if the Ravens they're supposed to have a pedigree, which means you can put that stuff behind you pretty easily and move on. But does it spiral for them into another tough loss against a division opponent? Do you let it sort of fester, if you will, and start the season this year the same way you started last year? So I think it's an interesting crossroads, I think, for both these teams going into week 2.
I could lay out a billion stats for you about just how improbable that loss was for the Ravens in week number 1. One that is out there is that teams with 40 plus points and 235 plus rushing yards in a game were 277-0, including the playoffs before Sunday night. Ravens made that 277-1. John Harbaugh, in terms of his fourth quarter blown or second half blown leads, 17 of those, which is the most at least since 1991. And in terms of winning percentage, or at least, the percentage the Ravens were at least supposed to win this game on ESPN, they had it at 99.1%, something that Benjamin Solak over at ESPN, who was actually with us on the network here for a little bit before obviously ascending, and he's done a great job over there. The Ravens have had, I believe it was 8 of those games that have been 90% or better. Yep. 8 games they've lost since 2021, in which they at one point had a win probability of at least 90%, 3 more than the next closest team. So it's just demoralizing stat after demoralizing stat. And again, for a Cleveland team that, those guys on the field aren't going out there and trying to tank for a pick or trying to they're trying to win football games. They're trying to establish a reputation here. We're still very early in the season. I know we'll get to some of the injury stuff a little later with who could be available and who might not be. But for both these teams, Myles Garrett re-signed with the Browns to win. He doesn't want to just stay on a team that's going to lose. That was something he made very clear. He's going to go out there, play his hardest. Obviously, we'll talk about, Jerry Jeudy's comments and what he had to say about the Ravens secondary. Like, again, there was like some back and forth a little bit, I guess, happening here on both sides. And we obviously know the historical aspects of this game as well. And I know what's kind of going on with the 30-year anniversary and everything that happened there. The Ravens actually released a statement, or there was a spokesperson that said that this all happened before that week 1 or that week 2 opening game was announced. But obviously I know that the sting probably does not go away in Cleveland with that, Spencer.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up, because it is a major talking point in Cleveland. The fact that it feels like sort of the celebration of the team that you stole from Cleveland in a way. I think like you said, the statement of, well, hey, we planned this a while back. I can wrap my head idea. And I talked about this on my Wednesday episode of the show. I can wrap my head around the idea that the Ravens probably just planned on this, like, hey, it's the home opener of our 30th season, so we're going to do it on this day. But my argument is like, well, you could have kicked the can down the line once you knew who the opponent was, because I do think it's a bad look. And I get, like, from a standpoint of the Ravens, like, the Ravens can relate, right? Or Ravens fans can relate, I should say, because they lost the Baltimore Colts back in the day in the middle of the night. And my great uncle actually played for the Baltimore Colts. So, like, I know the history there. I know all the stuff that went into that. But the difference is, since the Browns came to Baltimore and became the Ravens, there's been a lot of success, a lot of winning, Super Bowls, all those things. And in Cleveland, since the Browns were reinstated, yeah, they got to keep their history and all that. But at the same time, it's been just miserable. And so I think it stings a little bit more for Cleveland fans than it would any other fan base. And so I don't know that that's a motivating factor. Joe Flacco actually talked about this today. Like, I don't know that players now on the team are going into it with, like, some animosity of, like, I can't believe they're doing this when we're here. But I think for the fans, like, it would mean a ton if they come out of there with a win and sort of spoil that celebration, if you will. And back to the Joe Flacco storyline as well, his chance to go back to Baltimore, I mean, it would sort of be like a cherry on top and, an icing on the cake type moment. If he not only goes back and has kind of this nice moment, he's going to get to sort of be part of, in some ways, that celebration, because I'm sure he'll get a standing ovation from Ravens fans who love him. But if he sort of spoils it himself and he's the guy sort of playing spoiler, I think that would be a lot of fun for him to sort of walk out of there with a victory as well. So there's a lot of fun narratives, I think, that are in play this weekend when these two teams meet.
Yeah, and I know from the Ravens' perspective, it's kind of like, yeah, we planned it, and we don't really care who we're playing. I think they probably understand the optics of
Yeah,
kind of what
yeah.
it is, but I think Joe coming back for it, I think to me is kind of where Ravens fans are excited because again, Joe hasn't been back since that 2018 season, and coming up, we will be diving into some matchups to watch on both sides of the ball for both teams. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty coming up on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Browns. First, this show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IAHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive, standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. And this show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. And look, I come from a family that loves to golf, and I've seen a lot of ridiculous shots in my day, hole-in-ones, crazy shots out of the rough, onto the green, in the trap, the whole 9 yards. And golf's all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape ginger lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for 2 to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters Tournament. Ends October 31, 2025. We're moving along on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Browns, this crossover Thursday edition of the show. Kevin Ostreicher and Spencer German still diving into all of the content and storylines behind this big AFC North Week 2 divisional matchup. Again, I want to remind everyone, Locked On Ravens and Locked On Browns, 5 days a week of your team content. Ravens over on Locked On Ravens, Browns over on Locked On Browns. So be sure you like and subscribe in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form wherever you get your podcast. Now, Spencer, there are a lot of matchups we can talk about. I know one that I'm looking forward to, and I want to throw it to you first, and then I will say my first one. But is there one particular matchup, whether it's Ravens defense versus Browns offense or Ravens offense versus Browns defense, that really catches your eye?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, the Browns defense, per usual, trying to contain and limit the damage from Lamar Jackson, who we obviously know is one of the best athletes in this sport, one of the best quarterbacks in this sport. He's remarkable. That play he had against the Bills where it looked like he was dead to rights and basically just spun back the other direction and somehow eluded the guy and then made a 30, 40-yard gain or whatever the hell it was incredible. I was watching that game in real time, just with my jaw on the floor. It was ridiculous. And that's the type of stuff that that Lamar sort of brings to the table, and that the Browns are obviously very aware of him being capable of. They see him 2 times. They know he can do those things. He's done those things to them at times. But I also do think, especially lately, it feels, aside from obviously week 18 last year when the Browns really had nothing to play for and, it was kind of just like a throwaway game, if you will. The Browns, I think, have had some recent success containing Lamar, limiting the damage. That game in Baltimore 2 years ago in 2023, the infamous, Deshaun Watson comeback game in the second half where he played one of his best games as a Cleveland Brown. They were able to get some turnovers and force some mistakes. And so, yeah, this Browns defensive line is maybe, I'm not going to say the best in football, but it's up there. And I've gushed about it all training camp and the preseason, the idea that group is the deepest it's been in quite some time, that it's a stacked unit, especially adding Mason Graham to the mix. And I thought the Malik Collins signing was kind of an under the radar move that they made this offseason. And so you pair them, Garrett, with Isaiah Wright and Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire. And then some other depth pieces behind it. Like, that unit is good. And the ability to get some pressure on Lamar, but keep him in the pocket, not over pursue, and try to contain the damage with his legs, I think is kind of the key to this game. And I think I'm going to find myself throughout the season sort of leaning into that as a thing, especially in these crossover episodes. Like the idea that the Browns defensive line kind of controls how every game is going to play out. And I think that's certainly the case in a game like this, when you know you're going up against another really good quarterback who brings a different skill set than what you saw last week, even with Joe Burrow.
Yeah. And I think that the big thing with what the Browns defense has to do to stop the Ravens is, kind of just make the game messy. Like, I think that's kind of how they won that game last season, was just like they hung around, they kept pace, and then the Ravens obviously kind of did what they sometimes do in those late moments, and the Browns capitalized and pounced, and a Kyle Hamilton dropped interception later, and the Browns are able to get the job done, capitalizing on those moments. Hopefully the Ravens can buck that trend, but unfortunately it's been a thing for a while. One matchup I think I have to mention now, Spencer, is the Ravens secondary against the Browns wide receivers, mainly because I
would have gone there next, by the way. So I like that your head's where your head is at with this one.
Part of it is because the Ravens secondary was just really bad against the Bills, and they have to bounce back. But obviously, I think Jerry Jeudy gave us another reason to talk about it during his availability on Wednesday when asked about the challenges that the Ravens secondary presents, and he said no challenges. There was nothing there.
By the way, that was me who asked that question.
Was that you? Okay, let's go.
and I quite literally, this isn't one of those things where I'm trying to like toot my own horn here. Like, well, I asked him the question. I hope that he doesn't see that this is like gotten picked up gotcha thing, because I really wasn't trying to do like a gotcha. Like my question was just about, I was just trying to get a sense of like, hey, this Ravens secondary, they've got some really notable names, Marlon Humphrey. Yeah. Obviously Kyle Hamilton, like they're good. They're like Wiggins. They're a good secondary. They have a lot of good players. What do you kind of see when you watch the tape, and what challenges they present? And I didn't expect him to give that sort of blunt answer. I thought he'd kind of give me some like, football 101. Hey, yeah, they do a really good job in man coverage, or zone is something that they thrive in. But instead he gave me that. And everyone was like, wait, what did you ask him to get that answer? And I was like, I wasn't trying to cause controversy here, but apparently we've now started controversy. So yeah, I was surprised he said what he said. I don't know, like were the Ravens, was anybody on the Ravens asked about that today? Like, did anybody respond to what Jerry Jeudy said?
I don't believe so. I know Marlon Humphrey's comments were more pointed at the team as opposed to what Jerry Jeudy had to say. But look, I mean, based off of what we saw last week in week one, like the Ravens struggled there. Right now, they're the worst pass defense in the league in terms of total yards. They're 27th in the league in terms of yards per attempt given up. Now, I think the talent is there, right? I mean, you meant like Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Jair Alexander, Nate Wiggins, Malachi Starks. That's 5 former first-round picks in that secondary. They should have absolute star power. But, to me, I just think that the Ravens were exposed in terms of some of that very soft play calling towards the end of that game. They definitely took their foot up off the gas, and that's something they've had trouble with over the last handful of years. And it's been an unfortunate trend there. And look, fortunately for the Ravens, it's not Josh Allen walking through that door in a Cleveland Browns uniform. It is going to be Joe Flacco, who presents his own special set of skills, which obviously Ravens and Browns fans are both very familiar with. But I think the thing with Joe, and it's kind of, I guess, to a lesser extent of Jameis Winston, is that when he's on, he's on. He's slinging that ball. He has the arm. He has the arm strength to send that ball a bajillion yards down the field for a touchdown. But when he is off, he obviously can throw some balls that he'd like to have back, some turnovers. And so I think for a Ravens team that is trying to really emphasize forcing turnovers, actually, Spencer, this is a fact that is, I picked it up and other people have picked it up as well. The last turnover the Ravens have forced, do you know what that is? Do you have any guess?
Was it against the Browns last year?
It was Michael Pierce's interception on Bailey Zappi in that Week 18 game. That was the last one. And they played 2 playoff games and a week 1 game.
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit since they've done that. So look, Jerry Jeudy's talented. He's kind of resurrected his career and really made a name for himself in Cleveland. I know obviously they got Dylan Sampson involved a lot in the pass game in week 1. And I really like the Njoku Fannin duo with tight end. I also admittedly have a lot of Jamari Thrash stocks in Dynasty. So maybe that could, maybe eventually he can pick things up. I know it wasn't a huge game for him in week 1, but again, the Ravens secondary has to step up. On paper, they're more talented, but of course you don't play the games on paper.
Yeah, I mean, we came into the season understanding that the Browns receiving core, the talent at those positions specifically, was going to lag behind some other teams in this league. It was Jerry Jeudy, and I always like to say, like, the island of misfit toys. Like, you didn't really know what to expect. I thought week 1 was encouraging, and this is part of the reason, like, I felt bad for Browns fans because there was a lot to like from that week 1 game in terms of like the defense and the young players that this team is hoping are future cornerstone pieces for them, being, performing the way that they did. But I think it got lost in how that game obviously went down and how you end up losing in the end. So yeah, like I'm intrigued as well based off of how the Ravens secondary played in week 1, what Harold Fanning can do in some of these, the sets that they're going to get, and how Jerry Jeudy looks trying to bounce back from a couple drops that he had. Can Cedric Tillman keep rolling the way he has, and now it looks like he's sort of establishing himself as an actual weapon in the NFL. And also the Browns didn't take a lot of deep shots in that game against Baltimore. It was kind of like more of a take what the defense is giving you type approach. But we know that that's in Joe Flacco's arsenal. We know he likes to be able to air it out a little bit. He did that a bunch in 2023 when he was with Cleveland. And, it would help if they had a better run game because then they can utilize the play action a little bit more. But, like, yeah, I think given how Josh Allen was able to do some things against the secondary, I'm kind of thinking that the Browns will try to take some shots as well, and we'll see how effective that can be, or if they're lighting things up and clean some things up and they come out better in week 2 here.
We're going to see how it all unfolds, and coming up, we'll dive into how each team can pull out a win as well as some predictions. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot coming your way on this edition of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Browns for Crossover Thursday.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. There's nothing better than following the NFL season with FanDuel, and frankly, the best part is they have options for however you like to bet. Maybe you're a prop bet person and you want to bet on a player eclipsing a certain benchmark in a game, or maybe you want to combine that player's benchmark with a few other props or even a money line to build a same game parlay, or you can just jump on a money line in real time as the action unfolds for your team or against your team. The options are endless, and it makes every game feel like you're more involved, more in tune, and more excited. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
We are back, continuing on with the Locked On Ravens and Locked On Browns crossover Thursday ahead of week 2. Kevin Oestreicher, Locked On Ravens, Spencer German, Locked On Browns, still rocking out with you here. Want to again remind everyone today's crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Spencer, let's get into a little bit of the predictions, keys to victory. If the Browns are going to pick up their first one of the season in an environment that is an AFC North road game, what do they have to do to win this one?
Yeah, I honestly think they don't have to change much from what they did in week 1, which is what I think is interesting about. In a lot of ways, the blueprint you saw in that first game against the Bengals is going to kind of be their blueprint for the entirety of the season, but certainly in a matchup against another AFC North rival, another really good quarterback in this league. The idea here is you limit the damage from the quarterback. You limit the damage from Lamar Jackson. You ugly the game up a little bit, and you have some of these more elongated drives up and down the field where you're milking the clock, giving Lamar Jackson less possessions. That's exactly what played out this past week with Joe Burrow, where we were sitting there and we were like 3 minutes into the second quarter, and we'd only seen 2 drives for the entire game because the Bengals' first drive took up 7:28, and then the Browns' first drive took up 9:50. So that's the type of thing you're looking for. You want long drives. You sort of manage the clock. You keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands, and you limit the damage. And if you keep that thing close, you give yourself a shot. And the Browns got to kind of hope that their kicker can make his kicks this week, and that some of those miscues, the drops, and some of the other things that just kind of unfold, and maybe you get a turnover and that helps the cause as well. But they got to hope some of those miscues get cleaned up, and that the offense can sort of finish drives with touchdowns and just put some more points on the board. Because I will say, like, 16 points, even if you add the extra 4 points that they lost last week, 20 points, probably not going to cut it against this Ravens team. They're too good. But if you can get to like 27, I think you give yourself a shot. And so they're going to have to make sure they're finishing drives with touchdowns. But I think the number one thing is controlling the clock and obviously limiting the damage from Lamar Jackson, forcing him to also have long drives, go on long drives to try to score.
Yeah, I think from the Ravens' perspective, it's just about playing their game. I mean, so many times we've seen them kind of become a different team. The thing I've been saying all week is they're the Baltimore Ravens, the inverse of themselves when they get into these ruts of just like you do something so well for 3 quarters, or you kind of abandon your identity when clearly you're able to run the ball effectively. I mean, against the Bills, they just demolished them over the course of the majority of the 60 minutes. I mean, they averaged 8.2 yards per attempt, which is just otherworldly. And I know a lot of that came off of like huge 40, 50-yard touchdown runs from Derrick Henry, but like you kind of have to stick with that. And I think for this game in particular, starting off fast is going to be big. Converting in the red zone, obviously, is going to be really big as well for them, because the Ravens had those plays from outside of the red zone where, it was those huge runs. But then in the game against Buffalo, they were only 1 for 3. And you had other miscues like the missed extra point from Tyler Loop that was huge and loomed large. It's just very much so the Ravens not beating themselves, not psyching themselves out, and just being who they are. If they can do that, they can beat the majority of teams. But sometimes it also feels like against teams that they should beat on paper, sometimes they don't show up to those games. And that's what happened against that Browns team last season with Jameis Winston, who ended up leading the Browns to a victory over Baltimore. And I always say that, September losses, they don't matter in September, but they certainly do matter in December and January when you're fighting for seeding. And this would be the second year in a row, if the Ravens lose this one, that they would fall to 0-2. Their conference record would be 0-2. Their divisional record would be 0-1. And all that stuff matters. I mean, last year, the Ravens, they finished 1 game behind the Bills in the win-loss column, but they beat the Bills in the head-to-head. If they had just won that Browns game or won the Raiders game they lost in week 2, they would have been hosting the divisional round instead of going to Buffalo. So it's those little things that make the difference. I think that for the Ravens, if they can dominate up front early, they'll have a good shot to win this one. And I think it'll be a good game, Spencer. There's blowout potential in this one for the Ravens, but the Browns are a team that can hang around. I think everybody kind of expected, outside of the whole Cincinnati can't win week 1 games, like on paper, that offense is going to go crazy. And the Bengals held them to 7 second half yards. Like, it was incredible. So yeah. Do you think that this one's going to be close? Do you have any predictions? Doesn't have to be a final score or anything, but what do you kind of think?
I'm kind of torn, because part of me thinks that the Ravens are going to be so motivated from that game in week 1 to the Bills, how they lost. Derrick Henry is going to be running angrier than he usually does, and he's already hard enough to tackle, that they're going to be able to just like pull away from the Browns here. But then I'm also conflicted, because I'm like, hey, it's a divisional game. These things always tend to be closer than we expect. When at least like the games matter. Like I said, that week 18 game last year was kind of like a fluky whatever. Browns didn't really care at that point. They were just quarterback and hoping something would happen. So I don't know. I like the spread, I think, is 11.5. Do I feel comfortable saying that the Browns stay within that? Yeah, because I think they can keep it within 10 points at least, because it's the divisional factor there. But like I said, the Browns offense has to score more points than 16 to even have a shot in this game. And that's going to be sort of factor number 1 in how they try, if they're going to pull out a win. But I'll say the Ravens still win, because I think the world of this Ravens team. Got to respect the fact that they're a Super Bowl contender. They're very, very good. And so I can't pick the Browns consciously to win this game this week, but I think they cover that spread. And if you keep it within a score, then yeah, anything can happen, of course, as we even saw against the Bills on Sunday night. And maybe Joe Flacco has some magic left in him that he can pull a rabbit out of a hat in his old stomping grounds and help the Browns come home with a win.
Spencer's great. Be sure to check him out over at Locked On Browns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today, though, on this edition of Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the app, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Come up tomorrow, rounding out the week with more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.